Please welcome to the stage Tom Johnson from NAI Martins and Stan Longhofer, the WSU Real Estate Big Brain. Welcome, guys. I know that you're prepared for individual softball questions, but I want to start out with a lightning round because the Powerball jackpot last night was $301 million. And I thought, what if we woke up this morning and had tens of millions of dollars to invest in real estate, either regionally or nationally? I'd want this panel to advise me on where to put it. So Ted, you've already started this off talking about commercial, but where would you put a windfall, and why would you put it there?
You know, my favorite potential, our top tier cities are too expensive right now. Our cap rates are too low, we pay too much for it. So you go to the second and third tier cities. So you happen to be one of those. The other thing I will tell you this, and we know this in the title insurance, there's two towns that you want to be the dominant underwriter in. That's state capitals and college towns, because they never falter as much as other towns. So I just told you where you're at, and your outlook here, you know, for where you're at, it's phenomenal the amount of industry and technology you have in the city. So be proud of what you've done in the past, and the future's yours.
Yeah, great.
Well, I think Ted hit it before. If you look at the Midwest and Wichita in general and the spreads between what the first tier markets are looking at in terms of cap rates and what we're seeing locally, Wichita and second tier and tertiary markets are really strong. The downside of that is the availability of product. There's a lot of money out there chasing a lot of deals, but the owners of those properties are sitting there with very good cash flows, low debt. The incentive for them to sell is very difficult, because if they do sell, where do they take their money? And so until that inventory pops up and that deal flow starts going, it's going to be a challenge. But those second tier markets are still where we put the money.
Okay, Steve.
Now, Lou, I'm going to change it up a bit. I think Heldman Hall is the new home for the Barton School of Business would be great, and that's where you should put your money.
That'd be great. Thank you. It's a good answer. Stan, since you didn't answer the last question, I'll start this round with you.
That's right.
What are you enthusiastic about that you're seeing in the Wichita market, and what would concern you?
Well, what concerns me more is the long-term prospects of population growth in the Wichita area. And one of the things that those of us who grew up in Wichita and we love it is the fact that it is a convenient, simple city and a place that's easy to get around. It's a comfortable place. And sometimes I think that causes us to be a little afraid of growth, you know, that we don't want to outgrow what we like about Wichita. But the fact is, a city that isn't growing is a city that is stagnating and dying. And so we need to find ways to grow population. And population growth is the core of all areas of real estate. It's directly connected with employment growth, and it's directly connected with occupancy in all levels. So to me, that's the question of how do we continue to grow Wichita? And I think we face a number of different headwinds. That's a challenge there. In terms of positives, this is going to sound a little bit like an advertisement for the university, but many people have heard me say this. I really do believe that the Innovation Campus is the most exciting economic development activity that's gone on in Wichita in my memory, in my lifetime. And the reason is because it's really focused on integrating the university and the research activities that we have at Wichita State with the business development and the businesses we have here. And sometimes in economic development, we want to focus so much on hitting the home run, on finding that big business to come in. And instead, I think we really need to focus on how we grow what we do here locally and how we help encourage businesses that develop here to stay here. And imagine what this community would be like if Pizza Hut had bought PepsiCo instead of the other way around. If Rent-A-Center had bought Thorne instead of the other way around. And if we had kept the things we developed locally here, this would be an entirely different dynamic that we have. And I think that that's something that the Innovation Campus is going to play a huge role in helping to foster going forward.
Tom, what do you think? What are you excited about? What are you concerned about?
Well, you know, one of the things that we always talk about in our brokerage meetings and talking to clients about is that everything in the commercial real estate business is really based upon job growth. I mean, if you don't have employment increasing, you don't fill office space, you don't increase retail sales, the industrial market suffers over time, your housing market is lower, the absorption of apartment units are on the downside. So, you know, the concern is much to what Stan said, is how we diversify the economy, how do we capitalize on what we have here, and how do we look at opportunities that we haven't really uncovered yet. You know, where's the growth, where are the emerging technologies and industries that I think we have the opportunity to capitalize on here. You know, the downside is our structure and our organization and how we're really attacking that program. You know, those that went to James Chung's presentation, excuse me, a couple weeks ago, you know, came out of there a little depressed. And I think it was a good dose of reality. You know, we've been locally looking at these things in a number of different ways over the last few years. We've had our visioneering program for 10 years. We've done our city-to-city visits. We've pretty much identified those things. And I think the challenge is how we organize ourselves to move that forward. What's going to be the catalyst to bring that community together, and who are going to be the emerging leaders that make that happen? And I think the big opportunity is to capitalize in this new emerging millennial generation that's coming through, and identifying those future leaders and bringing them to bear to give their input on the challenges that we have to face, and organizing that going forward.
You like those answers. I want to ask you about your social media use, because you're a great example of an adapter to social media. And could you talk about how you think social media may be driving real estate or driving the economy?
Well, it's all about information, and you know, now information's immediate. I remember when I was economist at Texas A&M, chief economist at Real Estate Center, I actually had a staff of 4 just to gather data. I have one person, and I'm doing the whole U.S. and 11 foreign countries now. Just one person can take care of all those data needs. So the immediate connection, the speed, you know, it's time between signing a contract and closing it. It's the longer that time, the higher probability that deal's going to fall through. Anything you can do to expedite it keeps everything together.
Tom and Stan, could you each talk about how technology is changing real estate investment? Do you see things going on?
Well, I think that the big change, and Ted touched on it, is information, and the availability of information, and the timeliness of that information. You know, we've dedicated ourselves over the last few years to be the information source, and to manage that information, and to allow our clients in the industry to use that information for decision making. And the thing that we've really seen over the last few years, and we touched on it earlier, is the investment market. And the investment market has really grown, and I talked about the amount of capital out there. And so decision making from an investment standpoint is having reliable, timely information available, and being able to forecast kind of down the road where things are going. We're seeing that being spread across to the industrial side of really looking at, from an economic standpoint and a forecast standpoint, what's going to happen in certain industry segments. The same thing for office, the same thing for retail in terms of what's happening with demographics, income levels, jobs growth, and really trying to position our clients and our staff to have that information at hand, and really enhance that decision making.
I think Tom hit on the key phrase difference that's important, and this is something that, it's a nugget that you said about 12 years ago, Steve Martins, and it's always stuck with me, is that we're awash in data, and what we need is information. And one of the challenges with social media is that it is, to a large extent, a lot of noise coming out of a fire hydrant. And being able to distinguish what is the really genuine nuggets and the pieces of information out of all of the data that are really going to help you make a decision is key. And I think that's where commercial real estate professionals, residential real estate professionals. That's where they actually add their value. And that's not unique to real estate. That's true for almost any industry where you're providing analysis and advice. It's being able to sort through the data to get to the key information that's important for making a good decision.
Okay, I wanted to get your feelings on some categories. So, Ted, if you'll start us off, talk about residential, where you see that headed nationally.
Oh, residential's going up. My model this year says we're going to be up 8.2%. We're up 7.9% year to date. My model, that same model next year says we're up 5.7% in total sales of existing homes. I think that the price increase is going to slow down, albeit still at a steady pace, strong pace. My model's got anywhere between 3.5% and 5% for price increases next year, as opposed to, we're still in that sweet 6% plus range right now.
And Tom, let's divide this up. So could you talk about multifamily and apartments in this region?
We several years ago kind of looked at where the market was going and where some opportunities were, and a couple of our young brokers really honed in on the multifamily market and said, we think there's some real opportunities there, and they've been very successful in that category over the last couple of years. And by virtue of that, from an information standpoint, they've done an excellent job of capturing what's going on in the multifamily market and where it's going. And right now we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,800 new units in the pipeline, either under construction or proposed. And that's not a significant number in the grand scheme of things, but for Wichita, that's kind of a blip on the radar. The really interesting thing about what's happening now is the change in the type of apartments that are coming to the market. For a lot of years, we were very generic in terms of what we developed. It was a suburban, 3-story, semi-luxury project with a clubhouse and a pool and fairly standard 1- and 2-bedroom units. Today, that suburban market is really diversified, and they're coming up with much more unique exterior designs. The unit plans are a lot different. The amenity packages are much more extensive. In fact, one new project calls their amenity package a resort package, and have really scaled up. The really fun thing is what's happening in the downtown area. About 800 of those units are in the central business district, and historically we've had apartments downtown, but they've been in the early days the conversion of old warehouses in Old Town that kind of set the tone. It's kind of morphed from that now to where we're seeing conversions of old schools, conversions of office buildings, conversions of hotels. And so the dynamics that create and the types of units that the market has offered is so much different than we've had before. We've got lofts and flats and kind of cool brick walls and different things. And then lately we've got several projects that are ground up construction downtown, which we have not had in a number of years. 2 or 3 projects are under construction. One was recently completed. They're all much more contemporary in terms of their design. They're contemporary in terms of their unit and amenity mixes. And they're really tailored to this new millennial group that's coming online, plus the empty nesters like myself who are kind of getting to that age where you may be downsizing, looking at rental housing, and there's a great blend and a great diversity and opportunity for different lifestyles in multifamily now than we've had in a long time. Ted mentioned that we're kind of average across the board in Wichita. I wish we were average. Our average rent here for an apartment unit is somewhere north of $600 a month, which is really cheap. The national average, depending upon what source you look at, is $800 to $1,100 a month. The West Coast guys, the Bay Area guys, we did a little research earlier, and the highest rents in the country for apartments are in San Francisco. And for the bargain basement price of $3,700 a month, you can get a 1-bedroom unit. And for $4,500, you can get a 2-bedroom unit. So, hopefully as the economy kind of turns and the units are absorbed, we'll see some price pressures and see some rent increases going forward.
Okay, and Stan, talk about the residential market, both new homes and existing.
Yeah, you know, even in spite of the somewhat sluggish growth that we've had coming out of the Great Recession and the recovery that's followed, we've seen 4 years now of steady home sales increases here in the Wichita market, and that's been true across the state. Even as we've seen those home sales, what we haven't seen is addition of a lot of new listings, and so inventories now are incredibly tight. Generally in Wichita and in most of the state, we're sitting at inventories now on a seasonally adjusted basis of less than a 4-month supply. And for the past couple of years, as that's been happening, we keep saying, boy, you know, we seem to be transitioning into what the numbers would say would be a seller's market, but buyers haven't been playing along. And so you'd be in a situation where there'd be a multiple offer sale and somebody gets left out and a buyer loses out and they say, oh well, I'll wait. And they have just not been playing along and driving price appreciation. What we think we're beginning to see now is that that's changed. Last year we did finally see some solid price appreciation here in the Wichita market, and we expect that that's going to continue. Buyers are starting to show a little more urgency. Hopefully, as we begin to see some price appreciation, that's going to unlock some of the homeowners who maybe would like to sell, but because of the lack of price appreciation, haven't had enough equity to be able to do so and not have to write a big check at closing. And that's actually going to facilitate more sales growth going forward. So the existing home market has been reasonably stable. New homes has still been struggling. We're still down tremendously. We've not seen the gains that nationwide they have seen, sitting around about 1,000 units a year here in Wichita. And until I think there's pent-up demand for new home construction, and that people would like to see that, but financing concerns are still an issue there. Underwriting guidelines, you know, it used to be the case that you could, if you wanted to build a new home, that you'd have the expectation, well, by the time you get that home built, you will have sold your existing home, and lenders would go ahead and underwrite on the new loan. And now they kind of want to make sure that if for some reason you can't sell it, you'd actually be able to afford both loans, and that takes out a segment of the market. So
That's a radical idea.
yeah.
Ted, we don't have time for a minute of closing wisdom, but we do have time for a moment of closing wisdom. Do you have one?
My 2 favorite real estate investments today would be transitional land and industrial properties.
Gosh, we should have talked about that. Thank you. Thank our panel.